let's get into it and let's do it. Let's start with Iowa State, Jake. The Iowa State Homer Show. The fan perspective will go deeper in later this year, probably just in a couple weeks here before football starts. But tell us about the Cyclones in 2024 and what we can expect as an outside fan.
Yeah, I'm going to try and keep this as nationally based as I can. Great choice of the logo, by the way, on the overlay down there. Missed the tornado bird, but I don't want to get into all the weeds. We're going to basically preview all of that stuff throughout the month of August. We kind of already have this summer with the Iowa State fan perspective. Also subscribe. You'll find all of our good content here, Iowa, Nebraska, and Iowa State based. But let's talk about it a little bit. Iowa State, one of the biggest productive teams that is bringing back production in 2024. 19 of 22 starters comes back for this team this year. Coming off of I would say, surprising year for most fans. I think most fans in the middle of the gambling scandal and all that kind of stuff, the over-under win total was at 5.5 heading into 2023. To end with 7 wins, I think was a really good season for Matt Campbell going into year 9. I think the national perspective on this team is really how can Rocco Beck build off of his great freshman year. Big 12 freshman of the year offensively. I think this is a well-known name, or is going to be a well-known name in the college football community after this year. He's doing a lot of good stuff on and off the field, and I think Iowa State's really happy with where they have at their quarterback right now. Offensively, for the rest of the staff and the positions, an offensive change at the coordinator spot. Taylor Mauser gets promoted. He's going to be the new OC this year. Does he stick with the pass first, run second, kind of like Nate Scheelhaase did last year? I think so. I think they're going to replicate a lot of what 2024 had because it was so good. Jaden Higgins is going to be first team all Big 12 preseason wide receiver for you. I think this guy could have a really big year and maybe get in a third team All-American spot nationally if he really has the year he's supposed to. Defensively, we switch to the other side. What are we going to see? With the John Haycock defense, it's going to be similar kind of every year, but some tea leaves were leaked at the Big 12 Media Days last week from Matt Campbell and defensive tackle J.R. Singleton saying that we might see some 4-down linemen this year. I think that was due from the lack of pressure they had on the quarterback last year, so they go in and bring Louisiana Monroe defensive end transfer and Kennard Snyder. I think he's going to be really good. He's going to help out a lot. Tyler Unyedem, going to be another guy at defensive end that could be a pro potential guy in a year or two. The safeties are really good. Malik Verdone, Bo Filer, Jeremiah Cooper. Those are all conference level guys. The biggest question is, this is the best group of safeties in the league. They just have to stay healthy, and they haven't shown that they can do that as of history, but we'll have to wait and see if that group can stay healthy. This defense is going to be really good once again. And I think it's a group you're going to be familiar with at Iowa State. Over under win total is at 7.5. I think, we're going to probably break that down once we get closer to week 0, week 1. But I think it's a good number for this team right now. And their schedule is manageable, some tough spots, but it's manageable. I don't think it's going to be as hard as what we thought going into last year's schedule was. So that's kind of my brief Spark Notes analysis on my team. Listen to us more throughout the month of August.
Yeah, one thing that's interesting about Iowa State to me is I was looking at their schedule. I think they get a lot of their big, more competitive or bigger games in general, I guess, games at home. K-State, yeah. I mean, they get a couple of opponents there, and it's not I wouldn't say an easy place to win. JP would probably disagree, but JP, what do you think about the Cyclones this year? Obviously a rival's point of view here.
I think a lot of it is the production that comes back needs to step up, and that's not to say they can't do that, but with a program that's developmental like an Iowa or an Iowa State, returning production doesn't necessarily equal more talent or better play from a lot of these guys. And so like on the interior, like Jake's talking about, they got to get a little bit better on both sides of the ball. I feel like even if, you bring 5 offensive linemen back and the scheme change late in the year definitely help them gel better and, kind of cover up some of those spots that maybe they weren't as potent with. But throwing to open up the run and then letting that offensive line kind of work, I think it'll work for them this year. I really do.
What do you think, Reese? Do you think the Clones have a good year? I know they were talking about kind of the baseline on the show the other night, the fan perspective, like you said, check it out, at 7. You think they get over 7? You think they break that 8-win mark?
I think if that defense can figure it out, it's stout. I mean, you have Coach Campbell, and it's like, I forget what the stat was, but it's like, how many times has this Iowa State program won over 7 or 8 games in the history of it? And like, it's been, I think it's like 4 of the 7 years he's been there, they've been able to do that. So as long as that guy's your head coach and you have the quarterback you had from last year, who everybody is very high on this year, I think if you can keep that guy healthy and just have a stout defense, I don't think it's unreasonable to expect them to win 7 or 8 games again.
I think that's well put. So there's the stamp on the Iowa State Cyclones this year. Let's move down the line. Let's go to UCF. Gus Malzahn's squad takes on the transfer portal, adds some big pieces. JP is going to tell us a little bit more in depth about him. JP, tell us about the Knights this year.
100%. This is a team I was high on last year before they even got into the Big 12. I predicted them to win 8 games a season ago. I wasn't that far off. Like, I know they landed at 6 and then lost the bowl game, but they lost 3 Big 12 games by a total of 1 or 2 points. Like, they were right there. A 30-point lead blown, playing Baylor, very close against Oklahoma, super close against Texas Tech late in the year. I don't think I was that far off. It wasn't as much a judgment on the conference. I just thought I had a really good read on what this team was going to be a season ago. This year, strength schedule of 53. You're no longer the new dog in the Big 12, so it takes a little bit of pressure off you. But you do, I think it gets a little bit tougher with the additions of these teams because you're not going to miss as many quality teams each year. You're going to have to play the top in the middle of the conference pretty much every single year. There are some schedules out there that we'll find out later that are a little softer than others. UCF's is not one of them, though. This is a program with resources. It's a program that can learn to spend the money the right way and has put a lot into the school, into the football, and all these different things to go get some guys. So it's a program who should start to see that payoff on the field. Is that this year? We'll soon to be find out. KJ Jefferson, Arkansas transfer, will play quarterback for the Knights this year. Great thing about him is he is a perfect scheme fit. Now, he's not a John Rice Plumlee where he is speedy, getting the outside. He throws a better deep ball. He's definitely a thicker dude. But he is, I think, more talented than what Plumlee was a season ago. And I liked what Plumlee was doing for this offense. Great part about it as well is he doesn't have to do it by himself. You have a tandem in the backfield that is, I mean, could you say one of the best in the country, if not the best in the Big 12? Like, I think pretty clearly there. The one thing that I do look at is, like, where are you going to get the help on the outside of Kobe Hudson? Kobe Hudson will take over the number 1 overall receiver spot for this team. It'll be really interesting to see who can be that number 2 guy for them now. I think it's kind of between Xavier Townsend, Javarius Johnson, and Trent Whitmore. I think between those 3 guys, they got to find a true number 2 to kind of take some of that burden off of Kobe Hudson. The O-line will need to gel. They played 8 different guys across the offensive line a season ago. They'll need that to kind of work, but they only bring back 3. So transfers are going to have to fit in. Guys who got a certain amount of snaps are going to have to really help this team be good. The scheme helps a ton, but it's going to have to get better, to be honest with you, because you got to keep KJ healthy. And to be honest with you, if RJ Harvey and Penny Boone aren't getting, I think like 5 yards a pop sometimes with these guys, of how talented they are, it's going to be an offensive line issue that kind of shows up. Defensively, now this is exactly where UCF really wants to improve. The run defense a season ago was an absolute Achilles heel, like just gashed. And then everybody might remember the Oklahoma State game where Ollie Gord went in there and was held to like 2 rushing yards, if even. That wasn't the case in Terrier. I mean, they were getting gashed almost every single play. They're going to have to find a way to really shore that up, and they did that through the portal. They brought in a lot of defensive tackle help to thicken things up across the middle, but you do lose the ability to rush the passer on the outside. You lose a guy like Tremont Morris-Brash, who had 8.5 sacks last year. He would have been the returning sack leader in the Big 12, and I think he was near the top a season ago for the Big 12. Linebacker unit, I think, is going to be their best unit on defense. They got transfers from Texas Tech, Vandy, Cincinnati, and Idaho. All guys who legitimately have gotten a ton of reps, a ton of snaps, and have been very high-level players at these schools. So they're not going to be elite, but they'll gel really well together, in my opinion. Tough to worry about the DBs because we're going to have to really think, if we can't protect the run, it's tough for these guys to really protect against a big play action pass or a big play down the field. So with the rush defense has got to get better. These guys will kind of settle on a bit more because they've been very solid as well. A couple guys that I definitely want you to know: linebacker Deshaun Pace. He's one of those linebackers that transfers in. He was very good at Cincinnati a season ago. He'll be very good for UCF this year. And defensive end, Malachi Lawrence, he'll probably be your sack. He's your returning sack leader. He'll probably be the guy that leads the Knights again here in 2024. So looking at kind of where they are on everything, a 7.5 win total, looking at the schedule, it's not the easiest in the Big 12, but it's definitely not the hardest. I think your big ones, getting Iowa State on the road, West Virginia on the road, definitely stinks a little bit, but Arizona State being your other in conference and TCU being the two, I don't think anybody's scared to go play in Fort Worth or in Tempe right now. So the schedule's favorable, but they do play really talented teams in West Virginia, Utah, Arizona, Iowa State, and Colorado. We don't know what Colorado's going to be quite yet. So
At
I
Florida
would
too,
lean,
if you're out of the conference.
100%.
Yep.
I mean, it's not a cakewalk, so we'll see what the Knights can be in 2024.
I think the college football world is kind of looking forward to the KJ Jefferson, RJ Harvey show because that's going to be a duo to watch. Jake, where do you think the Knights are kind of landed? They have a down year last year, but some big wins that JP mentioned. Where do you kind of think of them this year? Did they do enough in the portal?
I think they did enough in the portal. At least they're taking chances. It's just a matter of, it's the portal. Are they going to hit the home run or not? And I think that's a wait and see. The defensive side of the ball, especially, they bring in the Barr kid from Vanderbilt and some other guys on the defensive line. Are they going to be able to stop the run? Do they fit and mesh right into Big 12 play? We'll have to wait and see there. But offensively, there's no question. I mean, this might be skill position wise it's top 2 or 3 most talented teams in the league with Jefferson, Penny Boone, RJ Harvey. And I like Townsend and Hudson. They're really good players too. So,
yeah.
What do you think, Reese?
Go ahead, JP.
I was just going to say, to add on to that, like if you put these 3 up against any other backfield in the country, do you really blink an eye at and be like, obviously they're not better than that one, right? Like they are up there with just about anybody, and nobody's going to just shake their head at these 3, no matter where you put them across the country.
Reese, what do you got?
I just think if this defense isn't that good, this is going to be a fun team to bet overs on because I think they're going to score a lot of points. And if they don't have a good defense, you're in the Big 12. There's going to be some high scoring, good teams there.
Fair.
So I think it's going to be a fun team to watch just to have on the football, have on the TV and bet some overs.
Yeah, I don't think we've thrown a lot of betting lines out there or betting picks, but that's probably a good one to take a look at because I do agree this offense is going to be fun to watch. So there's UCF. Let's keep it moving. We are going down to Reese. Reese is going to take us through the 2 years ago. This team played in the national title. Then they have a down year. Chandler Morris departs, which I'm sure Reese will mention. But let's talk TCU football in 2024.
Yeah, just like you mentioned, this team's coming off a bit of a letdown, even though I feel like people kind of saw it coming after your national title run in 22. They went 5-7. And this year they're bringing back 16 starters, 7 on the offense and 9 on the defense. But the defensive returners, is that a good thing? They gave up 28 points a game last year and 400 yards as well. They started off the year very strong, though. I mean, it helps when you play Colorado. They got 16 sacks in 4 games, and they gave up less than 100 yards rushing in the first 3 games. But after that, they really slowed down. They only managed 10 sacks in 8 games and gave up less than 100 yards rushing just once in the final 9 games. DBs played well for the most part, but again, to open up the year, they gave up 510 yards, and then at the end of the year, they gave up 400 yards. So how can you be more consistent and try to figure that out? And how do you try to button up that defense? How about a new defensive coordinator? They brought in Andy Avalos, who comes in from Boise State, and before that was the defensive coordinator at Oregon. And then offensively, you bring back quarterback Josh Hoover. He's slated to be the starter right now. We started the final 6 games for them last year after Morris got injured and departs, now goes to North Texas. But in his first game, he threw for 439 yards and threw over 400 yards against Baylor as well, too. So his only really problems came with turning over the ball. He still threw for 15 touchdowns, but it's also going to be his second year now under the offensive coordinator, Kendall Briles. So you would assume he would get a little more familiar with that system and and try to think like long ways down the road. What are we trying to set up for later in the games? And then you also lose your top running back to the draft. So look for Cam Cook and Trent Battle to kind of be your top guys in the backfield this year. And also, I think offensive, they got to be a lot more balanced. They only averaged 155 yards on the ground last year and 312 through the air. So it got to be kind of obvious what their scheme was going to be going forward because their line just wasn't that great and they just couldn't really just set that tone as they wanted to. And then when you dive into the schedule, it's the number 38 strength of schedule. And again, I think when you look at the schedule, it's kind of hard to pencil in back-to-back wins. I think their best shots at the beginning of the year, when you go to Stanford, you get Long Island at home. But after that, man, I mean, you get some tough games. You go on the road to SMU for the Iron Skillet. You get Kansas and Utah. And if that's a night game at Rice Eccles, good luck. We know how hard it is to win at that place. You get Oklahoma State and Arizona at home. But I think for this team, they're over-under at 7.5 wins. I don't know. I think that might be a little bit too high. I think if they do get over it, it's just 8. But I think they just got to get really lucky like they did in 2022 where they just found a way to win one-possession ball games and just not turn the ball over when they had the chance to win a game.
Yeah, a team we have not gotten to talk about their uniforms for this year, but I will throw in there, it might be the worst uniform change in the history of college football. So that would be my main takeaway for TCU. Get rid of those practice jersey. Maybe you'll have a chance to compete this year. JP, what do you think on the Horned Frogs this year?
It sounds like Sonny Dykes really likes the team he has in Fort Worth, and maybe it's okay that they're flying under the radar a little bit. I mean, they're not picked in the top 4, but I've seen them anywhere from 5 to 9 in the Big 12, and I think that's kind of right where they fit in. Again, like Reese made a great point. If they can win one possession games, any team in the Big 12 that can find a way to consistently win one possession games is going to find them hitting the over on their their season win total, and may find themselves playing for a conference title here. So that's where I will see them, is just how they're coached, how they handle certain situations, because they got just last year started off in such a weird way for them, and people just kind of let them fall for the rest of the year.
Jake, what do you think?
I'd be frank, I just don't really like this team. I mean, outside of like you have your bottom 3 or 4 teams, you have TCU, and then there's kind of the rest of the league. I just don't. The good teams or the legitimate teams I could see making a run in this league, I find one spot on that team that I'm like, man, I really like that player or that position. There's just nothing on this team that I like. The defense is very questionable to me. They were really, really bad last year, and Josh Hoover was okay, I guess, for stepping in and doing what he had to. Losing Bailey at the running back spot, he was their best player, at least what it felt like last year. They lose Jarrett Wiley, the really good tight end, for a couple of years. Like, I don't know where this team's strength is, if you really ask me. And I feel like I know most of these teams decently well.
Fair enough. But all right, there's everything on TCU this year. Before we move on to the next team, let's talk a little bit about what you need to do as a listener. If you're on YouTube, hit the like button. It helps more than you know. And while you're doing that, hit the subscribe button. Just 2 button clicks. We're giving you plenty of time to do so now. Spread the video around, drop a comment, drop a take while we're going live to let us know what you think of the teams we're previewing. It means the world to us that you're here. So leave a little like so we know that you were. But all right, let's move down the line. I'm up next. We're going to talk a little bit about Baylor. Baylor's a team that I think the college football world can agree has a coach that his name is sitting on the hot seat for a good reason. It's a team that was competing for championships a few years ago, has kind of lost their way. And there was one spot last year where it really went downhill for them, and they ended up 3-9. Dave Aranda looks to replace a little bit of coaching mishaps is the best way to put it. Brings in offensive coordinator Jake Spavital, who used to be the head coach at Texas State. He used to be the offensive coordinator at West Virginia, had his hands in the offense at Texas A&M way back in the day. Going through some fan takes of his time at West Virginia, not the best tenure there, but he had a good offense at Texas State. He just could never put it together, so maybe he finds the right home and he gets to spread it out a little bit with the Bears here. Talking about their offense, you bring back your top 5 wide receivers this year. You return a ton. You have a ton of experience on the outside, which is really important. One of the leading ones is Monterey Baldwin. The speedster went for 600 yards last year and 4 scores. He looks to make an impact this year again. And then at the quarterback position, everybody needs to talk about Toledo transfer DeQuan Finn, the reigning player of the year from the conference he came from. He threw for over 2,600 yards and 22 scores, and he's looking to make a splash in the Big 12. You also return your starting running back in Reese, so that should be a good 1-2 punch. You have the experience on the outside and at the skill position at quarterback and running back. Look at the offensive line. You're getting a couple guys back from injury. You also have a couple of starters listed as second in the depth chart now, so they have experience. So you add a little bit of depth there. So everything's looking up and up on the offense side of the ball, which wasn't the worst part of your team last year. We'll get into the defense, but there only is 2 games that really stood out to me. And you didn't put up a ton against Utah, who had a decent defense, and you put up 6 against Texas, who probably had one of the better defenses, but in the grand scheme of things, it wasn't as good as you thought for a team of that caliber. Let's talk about the defense. The defense is where the issues lies with this team. Aranda takes the play calling sheet this year. He has not done that since his time at LSU in the 2019 national championship team. He'll go alongside Matthew. Just don't want to get this last name wrong. Powledge, I believe it's pronounced. Sorry, Mark, if you're coming for me in the comments, but Matthew Powledge is their defensive coordinator. They're going to pair up on the play calling sheet this year, which should help them take a step forward. I know Aranda is really good at working with linebackers. He focused on that area this year. They do return 6th-year linebacker Matt Jones, who led the team in tackles last year at 82, and they return their freshman All-American cornerback Caden Jenkins. The only problem that lies on the defensive side of the ball is you really didn't have the transfers come in that you needed to, or you're going to have young guys step up on the defensive line because you had 2 guys medically retire this spring. So you're going to have some young guys come forward and make some plays for you on defense. They gave up 33 points per game, which is one of the worst in the Big 12 last year, and they had the 115th ranked national rushing defense. So the defensive line is where the question mark lies for good reason. So overall, this team, looking at their schedule, it's kind of weird. They don't really have a stretch where they're going to get 3 or 4 in a row. I think the main focus should be the beginning of your schedule. You look like you can get 4 or 5, but that gives you either a win against Colorado or Utah. Like they just kind of have these tougher games, and they don't really have a stretch where they can make up a lot of ground. I don't know if they get to the point where Aranda gets to keep his job. That's the main point that I took away from Baylor. Jake, what do you think on the Bears this year as the Big 12 guy? Do you think Aranda is looking for a new home, or do you think he gets to stay in Waco?
Yeah, I think it's kind of ironic that his last year potentially could be on his shoulders because now he's got to turn this defense around and call plays on that side of the ball. And he doesn't really get much help. It's like me last night trying to coach against JP. Sometimes you can call up the great plays, but the talent's not there. This defensive line for Baylor is really bad. They brought in like Daquan Finn and a couple of other players like offensively in the portal, but they struggled to get anybody in the portal on the defensive side of the ball. And that's a big concern. Keep this in note. Their first official conference games at Colorado. The Utah game is a non-conference. We've said that 100 times if you listen to this show. So I'm really interested. That first conference game for Dave Aranda this year is going to be really interesting because I think it's a good test, and you're going to have to play the high-flying, passing offense of Colorado and Boulder. So we'll see.
Yeah, what on paper to me, it just stuck out. Like these teams they're just trying to win high-scoring battles. I just don't know if they added enough on defense. JP, what do you think of the Bears this year?
I think there is a world that we could live in where Baylor wins 4 or 5 games and Aranda keeps his job. And that's if Daquan Finn is just insane, right? If this offense is just crazy, the defense isn't awful, but they're not kind of the level he wants. I think there's a world. It's a tough one to see, but I think it's there nonetheless.
Go ahead, Jake. I hear the little
the offense. He's not an offensive coach, and the offense doesn't keep up well enough. If the defense can't be this bad, like Dave Aranda's never going to have that great of an offense. I mean, look at the year he won the Big 12. How did they end up winning that football game? They stopped Oklahoma State on 4 straight plays at the goal line. Like that is what I think of Dave Aranda and Baylor being at its best. And I just don't see that team.
Yeah, and the one point I forgot to mention, but I mentioned at the beginning, is I think the last year, the turning point for them was that UCF comeback. They led UCF late in the fourth quarter, let them come back and win that game, and then they rattle off. They lost their last 5 games, so they only won 2 games after that. So that was kind of the downturn for them last year, so they got to avoid that one. Reese, what do you think on Baylor quickly here in 2024?
I just got my player to know coming from this team later on, so that's all I need on this team.
Okay, I like that. Move it down the list. Let's go back to the top. Jake is up again, and he is going to take us through Utah. The Utes are picked to win the Big 12, their first year in it. So tell us about them.
Yeah, first year in the Big 12, and I wouldn't say heavy favorites, but it's almost a unanimous favorite in this league right now. And we'll talk about the second team in just a minute. But what's in store for Utah this year is, I think, question number 1, how many more years do we get of Kyle Whittingham? He said at the Big 12 Media Days last week, he doesn't know if he'll be around for that game in Vegas in 2027 against Miami. Who knows? It's coach talk. You know, coaches always have a hard time hanging it up. But if this were his last year, I think he's got a pretty good squad to go out on, and that might be an indicator on what we have in store this year. Well, we get back Cam Rising. We get back Brant Keithy. Like, these are 2 guys we thought maybe were going to make an appearance last year, and the weeks just kept dragging on. And the talk is like, maybe they were just saving these guys now. That's the modern day of college football. Guys can stay for 7 years, get paid a little bit, and now they can put all their chips on the table when they're going into this new league where it's going to be very, very winnable for them. They added 3 guys in the transfer portal, 3 4-star kind of guys, wide receiver and tight ends, because this was one of the worst offenses in Power 5 last year, a group that ranked in the bottom 90 in points per game and yards. They really struggled, especially when they didn't have their starting quarterback. They bring in Dorian Singer, wide receiver from USC, who was really good when Caleb Williams was around, and Arizona before his time at USC. This is a guy who kind of showed out in the spring game from what I've seen, and he's going to be probably a top 2 or maybe their number 1 option at receiver this year, along with Money Parks. I know Cam knows that name kind of well. Those are going to be 2 of your top receivers. They bring in Carson Ryan to back up Brant Keithy. He's a 4-star tight end from UCLA. Another good get, because that's what Whittingham's offense is more so going to rely on when they're not running the football, is how good can their tight ends be. So really good pickup for them. Defensively, 7 starters return. I think this is one of the best defenses in the league, and it's honestly probably a top 15 defense in college football. And that's what we can really trust with when Kyle Whittingham has his football teams ready to go. Even when the offense was really bad last year, the defense still showed up and gave that team a chance night in and night out, even when Bryson Barnes was your quarterback. Logan Fano and Junior Tafuna, I think I said that right. I hope I will. I'll learn the name by the middle of the season. Don't roast us in the comments. We try our best. They're going to highlight one of the best defensive lines in the country. I think the interior wise, this is one of the couple of the best pairs of defensive tackles you'll see in the Big 12. If the bottom line, I think we can talk about this team for 10 minutes or an hour. They just got to stay healthy, and you got to keep Cam Rising healthy, or all this stuff can get thrown away and it's out the window heading into 2024. But here's a little tidbit. Their backup quarterback is Zach Wilson's brother and Isaac Wilson. I believe he's a true freshman or a redshirt freshman. I think he was a 4-star recruit, but it's going to be, we've always seen this before. It doesn't matter what your talent level is. Stepping in as a freshman's never going to be easy if he has to. So got to keep Cam Rising healthy in 2024.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at Utah. My first thing that popped into my head was my first dynasty I played in college football 25. Cam Rising won the Heisman. JP, how realistic do you think that is with a team like this that can be at the top of a conference in their first year in it? Do you think that gives Cam a better chance to find himself in New York?
No.
Okay, fair enough.
I think he's a great quarterback. He just doesn't have the star power that is going to sell people. I mean, that's kind of what
and the way they play. I mean, the style of offense isn't really, it's not eye candy by any means.
That's fair enough. We got to get his.
Depends what kind of offense you like watching.
We got to get his. Indeed,
we know what you like watching. Relax.
Smash mouth football.
Slow and play. Yeah,
36 dive. Yeah, 3 times in a row.
I should have found out if Utah had a fullback. That'd really get JP going.
Boot.
He definitely has a fullback. Come on.
I know. He's got the Ute shirt on. He's got the Ute shirt on. He's a big Utah fan. So shout out Utah. But Reese, what do you think on the Utes this year? Do you think they get it done and win their first year in?
They got the biggest X factor. They got Rice Eccles Stadium in the back of their pocket, man.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's hard. You can't go on the road and exactly. Yes, it is. It's 100% now. Facts. Hey, that's Tiger Stadium right here. Rice Eccles right here, right below it, baby. Try going there. And when the sun goes down, stuff gets weird up there, man.
If you're not familiar with that, Reese dropped a take last year in our previews where he said Rice Eccles was the toughest place to play in the Pac-12, and the public did not receive it well. So disagree with
that. Before the Oregon loss last year, I heard they were like 31-2 in the last 5 years at home or something like that.
I mean, it's a fair point.
I bet our buddy Josh Pate would agree with that. And if I just had
people are not happy about that.
Josh Pate would agree with that one.
I mean, it's not as crazy if you look at the statistics behind it. People just can't grasp looking at Utah as a top team like that, like a scary place to be.
Gorgeous stadium.
It is nice.
A lot bigger than you think it is.
I forget you've been there.
On TV. Yeah. Doesn't look big on TV, but it holds, I think,
packs a
65.
Punch.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. There's Utah this year. Let's move down the line. We are going to talk a little bit about Oklahoma State. JP's taking us through the Pokes, one of my favorite brands in college football. And if you follow our uniform Twitter, you know I'm always posting about them. So talk to us about Oklahoma State this year. Shout out to Reese's Hat Shop, no rivals, but tell us about the Pokes.
Yeah, I think this is a team that's going to get a lot of coverage, not just because of Mike Gundy's comments after the events that happened in Stillwater and then Big 12 Media Days, but just because they are highly touted and they are picked among the top 3 to win this conference. They also are a hot button topic because they have one of the best players in America playing running back for him, and Ollie Gordon. Here's my thing with this team going into this year. Your straight schedule is at 54. I think it's probably the easiest one in the Big 12. I mean, it's up there for sure. I think you could find one maybe that's a little bit easier, but not much at all, man. I'm gonna be honest with you. That's why a lot of teams people are so high on them, and they have a win total sitting right now at 8. Oklahoma State, this is a kind of a fun fact, a little tidbit that I got on it. They have 30 wins in the last 5 years in Big 12 play. That is now the most in Big 12 play in the last 5 years with the departure of Texas and Oklahoma. So that is kind of something to really look at and show you that Mike Gundy wins football games no matter what's kind of in front of him and how talented a team might be for him. This is probably America's best offensive line. They have the best running back in the country behind them. That is why they get a ton of shine. Now, who's going to be that second guy for Ollie Gordon when maybe he needs a couple of rests? I think there's some options here, and I like AJ Green, the Arkansas transfer. I think he'll be a great number 2 in this scheme. If we're going to run the football a lot, like Mike Gundy says that they're going to the next year, they're going to need more than one guy. Doesn't matter how good Ollie Gordon is. He's going to need a rest here or there. Again, Alan Bowman returns. I think the one thing with Bowman, though, is can you get him to stop turning it over? He's not going to be a game breaker. He's not going to change anything. He's not going to be insane. The one thing I do think here, though, is that when you look at Alan Bowman, is just manage it. Don't blow it. Like 15 touchdowns, 14 interceptions isn't going to do it this year. I think it's going to be a little bit tougher for him. If he does that again, they'll struggle in some spots. So let's get him to a point where he's not turning it over as much. I mean, he has 2 receivers on the outside, Brendan Presley and Rashad Owens, who are absolute dogs. I think that's skill position wise. This is probably one of the better teams in the Big 12 with what they have at receiver and at running back. So really look at Oklahoma State from afar. It's not the offense I'm worried about. Defensively, they gave up 28.6 points per game in 2023 and were just brutal against the pass. That's got to change because on their schedule, there are teams that can light you up through the year. 10 starters return. The experience, again, needs improvement. Experience doesn't mean your talent's coming back. It doesn't mean you're going to be better necessarily, but they need that out of them. So looking at this, Stillwater it is a tough place to play. I think it's unique in what they are and the paddle people, and it's got great support. And you wouldn't see that from the outside at the national perspective. I think people are shocked that this has such support on them. So looking kind of farther down, Nick Martin's going to be an absolute stud. He was first team All Big 12 a season ago. And then Kendall Daniels would be good. Linebacking core would be great. Get better at the defensive line, I think. Get better on the back end, and I will jump farther into this team. A couple guys to know, Cameron Epps a season ago played more safety. He'll play more linebacker this year. He'll be one of their better defenders. And then a new kicker, man. I mean, you bring in a new kicker. I think that last year they were a little bit worried about it. Logan Ward will be a new guy kicking field goals for the Pokes here in 2024. So schedule-wise, I know, Jake, you were kind of curious about it. Easiest schedule in the Big 12?
Yeah, I don't know how they get lucky. I mean, last year they had a gift in back-to-back easy schedules. I don't know what Oklahoma State's doing to get favorable schedules, but I will say, looking at it while you were giving a great rundown, the conference play doesn't start off so easy. I mean, they have Utah at Kansas State and then West Virginia at home. So 3 of the top 7 teams in the league, you got to play right away. And that was what my rundown was on this team. And my comment is, you can't have the sluggish start you did last year. Ollie Gordon had, I think it was like less than 200 yards in the first 3 or 4 games. That can't happen right away. And you can't afford the sluggish start because you get South Dakota State to come into town, right? And you get Arkansas. So you're going to be tested, and it's not going to be as easy as you did last year with Central Arkansas and Arizona State. So they got to be, if this is going to be one of the best teams in the league, they got to get it from the jump, I think.
If I'm going to trust any team in America, it's going to be the team that's coach consistently wins 10 games and nobody talks about. Like, I don't think people appreciate Mike Gundy enough, even though they drink probably 4 or 5 beers and drive 1,000 times. That
3
guy,
or 4. Come on. We've done it
3 or
1,000
4.
times.
Sorry. 4. He goes, drink.
He's only human.
3, 4 beers. I've done that about 1,000 times. It's like, come on, Mike. You can't say that on television.
He goes, I probably drank 3 or 4
man.
beers, but the running back got pulled over for a bottle of tequila and a bottle of vodka. They're both open. So was not 3 or 4 beers there, Mike.
Yeah, he was drinking hard liquor there, Mike. Sorry about that. He's a man. He's fit. I can't believe Gundy's 56. But Reese, what do you think on the Pokes this year? You got him on their cap, shop no rivals. But what do you think on this team?
Just touching on this hat, great hat. I don't even know if they sell this style anymore. Go get it. They have one that says Pokes upside down now. Yes,
any
Jacob?
hockey analysis for us, Reese? Since you're
I
wearing the
I haven't watched this. You think I've watched a second of this OSU hockey team at some time?
I mean, it's club hockey.
Absolutely not.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's got to be club hockey.
I mean, when it comes to this football team, I think the funny thing is you still got Alan Bowman here, who's in his 7th season. I mean, this guy just got to stay healthy and be able to hand the ball off to Ollie with this offensive line and just not turn over the ball, I think, and keep this offense on the field. Because if this offense is on the field, they're going to have a way. They're going to find ways to win ball games because that defense, I think, will sure up. So he's got to find ways to keep that offense on the field and not commit turnovers.
All right, there are the Pokes. Let's move down the line. Let's go to the most covered team in America probably at this time. Clickbait, rage bait, whatever you want to go with. Let's talk Buffs football in 2024. the prime Buffaloes. Let's talk Colorado. Reese is taking us through them. Go ahead.
I was about to just say, if this isn't America's favorite team and you guys haven't heard enough about them, don't worry. We're about to cover them for you guys again. And when you're going to talk about this team, let's talk about, the preseason second team where your quarterback, the leader, Shedeur Sanders. And I know everybody loves to kind of crap on this team and this guy, but this dude put up ridiculous stats last year. I mean, he threw for 3,230 yards, 27 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions. And this is the guy who probably had one of the worst offensive lines, if not the worst offensive line in the country. They give up 59 sacks, 56, and they average 69 rush yards a game. If you have a quarterback who's able to do that kind of stuff with that bad of a line, I can't imagine what he's going to be like this year when he does have a productive line where they went in the portal and got some guys. They hit the portal, like I mentioned before. They got some transfers. Tyler Johnson coming in from Houston, Khalil Benz from Indiana, and Justin Mayers from UTEP. They also got a new offensive line coach as well, too. So that's the big thing, too, is they knew what their issue was. They went out and got guys to fix it. But again, what's Coach Prime and this program actually going to be about this year? If they're just bringing in guys or they bringing in the right guys? It's quality over quantity, in my opinion. And then also, in Colorado fashion as well, they bring in guys. They also lose guys. They lost their running back and Dylan Edwards, their number 2 and their number 3 backs as well. So what they did replace, they brought in an Ohio State guy, Dallin Hayden. And on the outside, they bring back Jimmy Horn and Travis Hunter. And they also bring in Florida Atlantic #1 receiver and LeJonte Wester. And they bring in Vandy's #1 receiver and Will Shepard. Well, the offense was the shine of this team, and I think they're going to be again for this year. The biggest thing they're going to do is figure out this defense as well. They get 450 yards a game last year and 35 points a game. You're going up 7 touchdowns a game. It's really hard to have a winning record when your defense is giving up that many points. They only gave up less than 4 touchdowns in 4 of those games as well. And then when you dive into their schedule, they didn't really give themselves the best layups. I think when you come to their non-conference, you get North Dakota State to come into town. You go on the road to Nebraska, who's I think going to be an improved team this year. And then also when you dive into their conference schedule as well, they didn't really catch an easy draw, man. I mean, they catch a lot of the tough teams. They catch Central Florida, Kansas State, Arizona, Tech, Kansas, and Oklahoma State. And I mean, I just don't know. I think if you find a way in that stretch to go 3-3, I think that's a huge this team. I think non-conference, they can maybe get 2 or 3. But if you can find a way to go 500 in conference this year, I think with that conference schedule you got, I think it's a huge win for this team. Are they going to do it? I don't know. They do have probably one of the top 5 quarterbacks in college football. I'll stamp that. I think Shedeur is that good. But it's just, did they find the right guys in the portal for that offensive line? Because we saw what he could do last year with a bad one. So if he gets a good offensive line, I don't know, this team might be sneaky, I think, because they can, if they average the points they did last year with that bad line, what can they do with a good line? Because that defense is the biggest question mark, I think, too. Just the line, I don't know if the line can get any worse than it was. If it's anything better, it's going to be an improvement for this year, I think.
You're going to learn a lot about this squad Thursday of week 1. That's when they play North Dakota State. So they got a little bit of extra rest going into that Nebraska road trip. But it's a team that I feel like not everybody's tired of hearing of, but you just kind of want to see the product. Like you heard about them all last year. They looked incredible the first few weeks, and then they fall off when adversity kind of hit them. But JP, where do you think the Buffs are at this preseason?
I think they have a better skill position group than they did a season ago, and that's with the loss at running back. I mean, I'm not kidding when I say this. This will be first team all Big 12 receiver here. LeJonte Wester, the kid from Florida Atlantic that's coming in, over 1,000 a season ago. He's going to be first team all Big 12. If Shedeur can get him the football, whether he spreads it out a ton or not, I think one of the better skill position groups in the conference for sure. Again, Reese is right. Like, we just need to see the defense. Like, it needs to be a little bit better. If they can get to average, I'm seeing bowl games. But if it stays below average, it's hard for me to pencil in 6 or 7 wins.
You got to think their scheme's going to be a little bit similar. They do lose Sean Lewis, who goes take the head's job at San Diego State. So you're wondering kind of everything's going to be similar, like, or are there going to be better protection schemes? Jake, what do you think on the Buffs?
Just how different will the 2 deep be this year? I mean, they lost a lot of 1-score games last year, and I think it had to do with a lot of change that Deion was trying to do in the middle of the season, but also just they didn't have the depth, particularly at offensive and defensive line. JP nailed it on the head. I think this is the best wide receiver room in the Big 12. I love Wester. Even the Omari and Hampton kid showed a lot of flash last year. And if Wester can come in and take some of the load off Travis Hunter offensively, and if Hunter can be like your third option, I think that's pretty damn good. But it's going to come down to, can this team get through November healthy, and are they going to have guys ready to play?
Correction on the Omarion Miller.
I was about to say,
Yep.
you just said running
Hampton.
back.
You said Hampton.
I was going to say he
Did
transferred.
somebody else
Damn,
catch that?
that's more.
Did I say
Louis.
Hampton?
Yeah, I
you
think
did.
you just
That's
did
all right.
that habit.
Yeah, we're only human.
It's all right. We did go ACC to Big 12. We set you up.
Hey,
Good
hand
call.
up right here. I wasn't the first
Thanks for
one to
helping me.
Yeah, good. Somebody in the comments is commenting already dropped
They're
it
already
down there
typing
and
it.
let you have it.
You
No, they
got it
already let you
wrong.
have it in St. Clem. They
Did
might
he
hit
really
the
just say
delete.
that?
I thought,
Yeah.
Hampton did show some flash last year. I think he was kind of solid.
But we love that. So if you want to give us some heat, throw it in the comments. We like to listen to it. It's college football.
We
Everybody's
like
got
the
their own opinion.
criticism.
Yeah.
Constructive
No,
criticism.
and we like heat. Bring it. But all right, let's go on. Let's go down the line. I'm going to talk a little bit about Kansas, and I think Kansas fans are excited for an upcoming season that they should be. Lance Leipold brings in Jeff Grimes at offensive coordinator. He comes from Baylor, the team I just previewed. So they had a good offense, like I mentioned, and they have the pieces to do so. They bring in, and I shouldn't say bring in, but they have 30 seniors on this roster, everybody. So if they're going to compete for a conference, it should be this year. And they're up towards the conference preseason rankings for good reason. They have a great 1-2 punch, probably one of the top, if not at the top in the Big 12 with Jalen Daniels, who just can't seem to find a way to stay healthy. And Devin Neal, who's probably one of the better running backs in the country. This conference is loaded with him, and he's one of them. He will become the all-time rushing leader at Kansas this year. That 1-2 punch has got to be relied upon this year. However, you do have to put emphasis on keeping Jalen Daniels healthy. He's got injured the past 2 seasons. Jason Bean stepped in and kept that offense relevant. You don't really have that safety blanket anymore. You got a true freshman behind Daniels, so it's imperative to keep him healthy, which I think everybody can agree with. On the offensive line, you replace some pieces, but you do get back a former 5-star transfer and Logan Brown, who transferred in from Wisconsin 2 years ago. He was knocked out with a knee injury last year. They said he stood out in the spring, so that should be a nice sense of protection for keeping Jalen Daniels healthy. Looking at the outside, you you retain 2 big pieces in Lawrence Arnold and Luke Grimm. Those are good Big 12 receivers with a lot of experience, and I think they'll be the main targets for Daniels, but he does have some young talent as well. That's the offense side of the ball, and it's going to be the main focus for this team because the defense has some question marks around it and got beat a few times last year, but they competed throughout this season. They just had a couple of weird losses. They had the loss to Texas Tech, that 16-13, so they just had weeks that they didn't show up. With the experience now, I really think Leipold's got this squad dialed in to better sustain themselves through a year. But on that defensive side, you have probably the best combo defensive back in the conference in Kobe Bryant and Mello Dotson. These are 2 of the top defensive backs out there right now, both going to find themselves playing in the league one day. But the defensive line is questionable. That probably is a nice way to put it. It's questionable. They have to have a few guys step up. It's an improved rush defense. Last year they improved, but they're looking to take a step forward, but they lost a couple of guys at graduation. They returned one off injury. But if you're looking for somebody to fill a void, if a young guy can't step up, DJ Warner is the highest rated recruit Kansas has brought in the history of the modern recruiting era. And I think he could make an impact for this team. At the schedule, I don't love the schedule when it comes to who they get on the road. They play West Virginia on the road. They play Kansas State on the road, and they go play at Baylor, who we just talked about, whose offense is there. So it really matters how the defensive line fills in this year because I think they're going to get their points. It's Kansas. They have the schemes to fit it. They have the tight ends. They have the wide receivers. They'll score. It's just whether or not they can get stops and stop the ground game and all that clock runoff. So I think Kansas does have another successful year. They put up 9 last year. They're definitely getting to a bowl, and they're picked at the top of the conference for a reason. So they could make some noise. Jake's the Kansas hater, so I'll ask him first. Jake, am I far off? Look at him shaking his head, but he did. He didn't think they were going bowling last year, and they put up 9.
First of all, if you'd have asked me last year, if you'd have told me preseason, hey, Jalen Daniels is basically going to be hurt for the year, are you still confident they're not going to make a bowl game? I think I could live with that. But that's like the biggest storyline for me this year.
Doubter.
This team's really, really good. I think they're really talented, but you don't have a safety blanket in Jason Bean like you talked about. Cole Ballard steps in last year as a freshman, and I think that was the reason they basically lost that Tech game, and I think he played in the K-State game too. So I have it down here. Jalen Daniels has got to play all 12 games. And if you're a Kansas fan, you got to beat Kansas State. I don't know if you guys know. I'm pretty sure it's like they have a 14-game losing streak to Kansas State. Like it's got to end now. So they got to snap that streak. And then defensively, I think they're going to be okay. I love the cornerbacks. By Joe, was one of the best transfer pickups late that they had from Michigan State defensive end to shore up some of those questions on the defensive line. So I do like this team this year.
All right, there's a little bit of a change. I like that.
Hey, I'm an honest man. I'll admit when I'm wrong,
He's
and
a
I'm
truther.
open. I'm always open. And
it's all right. Just doubted Jason Bean. It's fine. Jason Bean, he proved you wrong. But JP, what do you think on the Hawks? I shouldn't call him that. Sorry.
I was gonna say, don't do that.
Sorry.
The fan base, if you're this far into football and you're starting to get the things you are now, you're going to kind of run into a fork in the road. Please travel and support this team. If you really want to be considered serious as a program from here on out, you're going to have to travel to Kansas City to do it. It doesn't matter.
Oh yeah, Arrowhead.
You're not that far. I think you should be able to figure it out. We got guys from all over the state of Iowa that do 5 hours, 4 hours, 2 hours every Saturday. You can drive an hour and a half from Lawrence to Kansas City or whatever it is.
It's like 50 minutes at the most.
Well, I'm just saying, like, you want to be taken seriously as a fan base, and in this, like, you got another good team, go support them.
I should have mentioned that they are playing every game not at home this year, as their stadium's under construction, as it should be. That place was a dump, so it was much needed, but they are not playing at home. But it will be fun for like a few of those games. The first couple will be interesting to see how full they can get that place, or just people around the area now going to Jayhawk games.
I'm not sure what that soccer stadium's called, but that's the one they get Lindenwood and UNLV in.
Yeah, 18,000 is what that soccer stadium.
But
holds.
Is that the Sporting KC one, right?
Yeah, I just don't know the name of it, but it's nice. It'll be cool.
Yeah,
they played football in it before. I think they played a D2 national title in there a couple times.
If you're a Kansas fan, that area is fun. I believe it's called the Legends area. I've stayed there a few times. Definitely check that area out and go to one of those games.
Stay at the Great Wolf Lodge, just across the street.
Any KU fans in the comments, let us know.
Or the Comfort Inn and Suites. It was a nice hotel next door, or it's something else. But stay there and send some pictures. I think I would like to get down there. I forgot that it's that close now. But all right, there's Kansas. Let's move down the line. Next up, we are going back to the top to Jake. Jake is taking us through the opposite side. Let's talk rivals and let's talk K-State football this year.
Speaking of no rivals, this is a new addition. So go and shop their hats if you're a K-State fan.
Yeah, it's dirty. Avery Johnson wears them all the time.
There you go. Let's talk about him first, because I think that's the familiar name everybody knows about. Avery Johnson takes over as the full-time starter to lead Kansas State as a sophomore. This is a former 4-star. Could have almost been a fringe 5. He was really, really good. And I think everybody's kind of ready for him to take the reins at quarterback here at Kansas State. The question is how can he do it without his offensive coordinator, Colin Klein? Leaves for Texas A&M with Mike Elko. Everybody knows about that. So how does that change play calls? We'll have to wait and see. But he's going to have a lot of weapons around him. And let's start with the running back room. DJ Giddens is a top 10 or 15 running back in the country, and he's probably a top 5 running back in this conference. He's going to be your power back. And I think somebody mentioned it in the Colorado preview. Dylan Edwards, his old Pop Warner teammate of Avery Johnson's, comes over. He's transferring back to Kansas State, where he'll be kind of the second string or slot option, more of a receiver back. So it's really like a kind of a thunder and lightning running back room that I'm really going to be impressed with. And I'm excited to see kind of what Giddens can take that next step, hopefully not against Iowa State. Kleiman feels like this is a deep receiver room. I think last year, the one thing that they lacked, other than much of a playmaker at quarterback with Will Howard, was he didn't necessarily have a ton of guys to throw to. They lose Ben Sinnott, the stud tight end. So what's the receiving room going to look like? Jace Brown had a really good freshman year last year. He's looking to take that next step up. And you Big Ten guys might know this name. Dante Cephas was a guy who came over from Kent State, and he was supposed to be a big get for that Penn State program last year. He was like, Penn State's finally got the receivers to take that next step. He just didn't really fit in that room. He didn't really have the right fit. So he goes over to Kansas State and tries to turn that receiver room around. He's going to be the X factor for the receivers. Really excited to see what he has in store. I think when you look at the defensive side of the ball, it's nothing crazy. I think when you know a Chris Kleiman team, they're going to take care of the football and they're going to be rock solid on defense. Much like Iowa State, it is more of a kind of in-house talent wise. They really have to recruit in state and kind of develop there. Defensively, they're always going to be really solid, but I like the secondary. Jacob Parrish, VJ Payne, Marquise Siegel. Like, these are all guys that are going to be really good from top to bottom. There are a lot of good corners and safeties in this league, but overall, from top to bottom, I think that's going to be a really impressive group. It's just a matter of, can everybody else take their part? So this is the second place or second pick to win the Big 12. And I think rightfully so. They have a playmaker at quarterback, absolute stud running back that fits their head coach's system really well. And I think the defense is going to be what you can expect in normal years. So if they can all stay the same, I think this team's got a good shot of playing in another Big 12 title.
Reese, I'll go to you first. You've been kind of quiet down there. I haven't gotten around to you, but what do you think on the Cats this year? Do you think Avery Johnson gets it done, the young stud?
Yeah, I think he's the X factor. I mean, it is hard losing your offensive coordinator and kind of getting into a new system, I think, for your first year, especially when you are taking over the reins for that entire offense. But like, I think you have the right guys around him. You do have Giddens in the backfield. So what better way to help a new quarterback than to have a solid guy you can hand the ball off to on first and second downs all the time. So I think this K-State team will be just fine. You look at their schedule. It's obvious why they're kind of at the top end of this conference. And I'm really excited to watch this team this year, I think.
All right, I like that. JP, let's talk to you about, they go on the road and play Tulane in week 2, as mentioned. Do you think that's going to be a better game than people realize?
I think it will. It's going to be your first road game, and then it's not an easy one. Like Ole Miss had got in a battle a season ago. Like, I think Tulane, again, we covered them in the American, but they are a better team than people see right now. And so it's going to be a tough one for me. It's a no-name bunch defense that just makes plays. It's kind of how the program's built. It's kind of how they handle things. If the shine stays on the offense and the defense just continually is good every single week, it's going to do a lot for this team to take a lot off that quarterback's shoulders.
All right, there's Kansas State this year. Let's move down the line. We got another big team that is just entering the conference. It probably would have been, I don't want to say they lost steam because they lost their head coach, but let's talk Arizona. JP is going to take us through the Cats' first year in the Big 12. JP, tell us about them.
Yeah, this is a team I think is getting a lot of hype. Other than Utah coming into the conference this year, there's reasons for it. And when you got a guy playing quarterback like Noah Fafita, and then now I've slowed this down. It's still not perfect. To Totoro and McMillan.
I was going to say Totoro. Yeah, I'm not rolling my
Totoro
R
and
like
McMillan.
Just say McMillan.
Anyway, yeah, I'm going to clip this. Ready, go. Noah Fafita and McMillan are seriously one of the best quarterback receiver duos in the conference. I think you could put them out there with Shadur and whoever turns out to be his number one. I say KJ and his guys. Like, this is one of the better receiving duos in the Big 12. It'll be a ton of fun to watch this offense continue to work. Now, I think the Jed Fish leaving for Washington, I think they might have gotten a better coach out of it. And Brennan, I think coming from San Jose State, there's a lot of things that are similar in how they'll have to do things. It's going to be more of a developmental program, but it's a lot easier to get kids to come play for you in Tucson, Arizona at the University of Arizona than it is in San Jose State. So it's going to be very interesting to see how it all gels together. They're going to need a feature back, though, to really help out this offense. There's a couple guys there. Ja'Cory Croxy Merritt is an option. He's a New Mexico transfer, ran for over 1,000 on a bad Lobos team a season ago. I think he'll be your main option there. Where does the number 2 pass catcher come from? McMillan is good, right? Lamonius Craig, though, Malachi Riley. Or to me, I think it's going to be the tight end, Kenyon Barrett. I think he is going to be one of the better tight ends in the conference as well. Continually working through this team, though, they just kind of, with the portal, I think they just plugged guys in some spots, right? Like, get a guy that'll help us this year and we'll worry about it a year later. It's not built with star power. It's not built with guys who are above average or anything. These are just some average guys that got through the portal, and that's the defensive kind of what they decided to do on defense and how they've gone through everything. The strength will be the back 7, 4 DBs return, and the 2 really good linebackers. Jacob Manu was first team all Pac-12 last year, and Trade Stokes was honorable mention. Those are your 2 linebackers. Front 4's got to get better or we're going to get eaten up on the ground. And for Arizona to kind of take that leap and get over the win total of 8, it's got to be a much better front on the offensive line, on the defensive line, and you've got to find a number 2 option other than McMillan this year. So just quickly, like looking at this schedule, if you're looking at Arizona, it's tough to say it's not favorable, but I do think that there are some holes in the schedule that I think they will get shocked with just changing to Big 12 play here in 2024. I don't know how you guys have them read, but a lot of people like them as a dark horse in the conference. I think I needed a little better ads in the portal. I needed less guys to leave. I needed this team to stay a little bit more together than it already did. Like, you keep Fafita and you keep McMillan on campus, that's huge, but I needed a couple more pops in the portal for this team to be really a dark horse in the Big 12.
Yeah, I think Fafita, retaining him was obviously the massive part of that, because if he doesn't have a quarterback, how useful is McMillan? So if Afita doesn't stay around, I don't know if we're talking about this team. They might be in the last segment where we bunch a bunch of teams together, but they definitely have a chance to make some noise. Reese, what do you think on the Cats this year? Do you think they can get it done their first year in?
I think it's tougher too when last year they kind of were not seen as being that great of a team. You're able to sneak up on teams, but when you do have the expectations of having one of the top quarterbacks and one of the best receivers, I think teams are going to be able to scheme that up and they have their eye on you more versus like, oh, this is a team that we can still throw something at them, but we don't got to worry about our best. But I think they just got to be able to can keep up with their success.
I like that.
The one thing I'll add with the schedule though is they don't get the easiest road games. Like the road games they get are tough at BYU, at Kansas State, at TCU, at UCF. Like there's a toss up there. You're going to lose a tough
Utah
road game as the Big 12. Like this is I think it's a little tougher. So I have them around 8-4, like right on that win total. I could see the 9-3. I could see the 7-5. I just don't see 10.
Numbers in a good spot. Jake, what do you think on Arizona this year?
Hey, you guys were looking for my Kansas hate earlier. I'm going to shift my hate to another team that's red and blue. I think this team is just a little bit overhyped, especially when they got some first place votes on the preseason polls this year to win this conference. I just don't see it. That entire defensive line transferred out after Fish left. And I just think it's going to be really hard no matter what. I think Brent Brennan's a good coach, but first year head coach, it's going to be a transition, especially in a new conference that's just setting him up to not succeed as much, I guess.
All right, there is the U of A this year. Let's keep it moving. We got a couple more teams to cover before we do our fun, fast segment. But let's talk West Virginia football this year. Reese is taking us through the Mountaineers. Reese, take us home.
Yeah, how about this team? I mean, last year they were picked to be dead last in conference, and they proved everybody wrong. They went 9-4, riding on a solid run game and a solid defense as well. And this is a team where a lot of people thought this head coach, including ourselves, thought he was going to be on the hot seat. But what a better way to do it than to repeat success this year is they bring back 3 of 5 on the offensive line. And this was a team last year that was number 3 in the country, averaging 229 yards a game on the ground and only allowing 10 sacks, and including 3 of the final 9 games of the season. And this is going to be massive too for you're bringing back your quarterback as well, and Garrett Green, who had a very impressive junior season, throwing for 2,400 yards, 16 touchdowns, and 4 interceptions, and rushing for 772 yards and 13 touchdowns. And then also in their backfield, they may have one of the best 1-2 punches in the Big 12 when it comes to their running backs. They got C.J. Donaldson and Jaheim White coming back. White topped over 100 yards in 4 games last year, and Donaldson topped over 100 yards in 3 games last year. And then here's a fun fact for all you West Virginia fans too. Under Neil Brown, if you rush for over 100 yards, you're 27-8, and if you rush for under 100 yards, you're 3-21. And then when you look at the outside, they bring back 6 of their 7 top pass catchers, including tight end Cole Taylor, who was 17 all-conference last year. So look for him to be kind of more of an integral part of this offense. And then defensively, you're only bringing back 5. But Neil Brown is confident in his front 7 guys, believes they're going to be very physical, very dominant, can help set the tone for this team, what they're going to be about this year. And then all over, they brought in transfers. They brought 2 in on the line, 2 for their linebackers, 2 in the secondary. Not names that are going to jump off the page at you, but the defensive coordinator, Jordan Leslie, is confident they found the right guys. Again, getting quality, not just quantity. They found the right guys to fit their scheme and what they're trying to do. But I think when you look at this team, I think that the toughest thing they have is the schedule. They didn't really get any layups either. I think you look at this. You open up with Penn State at home. You go on the road for the backyard brawl against a Pitt team I covered last year who's scrappy. I don't know how good they'll be, but it's still a rivalry game. It's still going to be amped up and ready to go. And then when you go into the conference, they get 7 of the top 8 teams with the best odds on to win the conference. Starting with Kansas on week 4 at home. You get Kansas, Oklahoma State, Iowa State, Kansas State, Arizona. And then you get Cincinnati and Baylor. Then you get UCF and Texas Tech. I mean, where, other than those Cincinnati and Baylor, it's like, where do you catch a break in there? Like, if you go on a skid, it's just I think it's a long road ahead of you.
I like that. I think that's a good outlook on this team. I don't want to say I'm too high on them. I feel like it's a team that's kind of slid my mind throughout the preseason and the offseason. Like, I don't know if Green's the guy that he's getting all the accountability. I mean, they had a good year. They were really good on the ground and they knocked out 9 wins, but I'm just not as high as most people on this team. What about you, JP? What do you think on WVU?
I legitimately think this team could be better and win less games. I've been all over the place on my second team that I'll put the conference title this year. This team was in the conversation, but I just can't see with the schedule. I mean, it's the schedule you're handed and you got to play what's given to you, but it's tough. If you take it week by week, maybe they shock some guys here, but I do think they're talented. Just the way they play football and the scheme they run, I don't think they'll ever be out of a game.
I think it's a fun place to play too. Like if they get really good and that atmosphere gets crazy, that could be good for college football.
Country
But Jake,
roads.
what do you think, Jake? Do you think West Virginia is going to be the team this year?
Same boat as JP. I contemplated on putting this team in my Big 12 title. We still got some time. I might change my pick here, but their style of football, it travels well on away games. And West Virginia fans think Garrett Green's like a top 3 quarterback in this league.
I know.
He's good, but we want to see more this year. I want to see him take that next step, especially throwing the football. But if this offensive line replicates what they did last year, I think they can get back to the Big 12 title and possibly make that dark horse run. But Reese laid out the schedule for you. It's not going to be easy, but I do like this team.
All right, there's the Mountaineers this year. Let's move down the line. One last team to cover before our fast fun segment. Let's talk Texas Tech, a team that I believe it was JP and I were high on last year. Didn't really pan out. Chuck got injured, kind of spiraled their year down. However, they are bringing back probably one of, and I guess I get to say this with all the teams I covered, one of the better duos in the backfield in college football, and definitely within this conference, and Baron Morton and Taj Brooks. Baron Morton, this is a fun fact for all you people at home that I learned today. He was the highest rated quarterback recruit Texas Tech's ever brought in. And yes, that includes Patrick Mahomes. So Morton, who maybe hasn't reached his full potential, has an opportunity to do so this year as the starter and looks to do it with a really good running back there in Taj Brooks. Taj Brooks split time last year, still put up 4.7 yards per carry. He's expected to be one of the better backs this year. And I think he could sneak in to be a Heisman hopeful later in the year. So that's a good backfield to rely on. On the O-line, you're kind of replacing a lot of spots as you wanted to do so. They weren't the best last year, but you bring in 2 offensive line transfers. They're very highly rated within the portal. One from Toledo, where you get your offensive line coach, your new coach. He brings in Vinny Scurvy, who will be a good offensive lineman for them. And then from Memphis, you bring on Davion Carter. Those should be 2 good pieces to rely on that backfield. But on the outside, you got some weapons too. You bring in Wazoo transfer Josh Kelly, who put up 900 yards last year. And then you have a 5-star true freshman wide receiver in Micah Hudson. So you have the pieces and the skill guys there. It's just whether or not McGuire's squad can put it together this year and have a more sustained offense throughout an entire season. On the defense side of the ball, this is where I feel like a lot of the questions lie for Texas Tech. I really do. They brought in some transfer. They brought in a defensive lineman from Rice, DeBraylion Carroll. He was a good player. He looks to move up to Power 4 football, but it's a little bit of a shell shock to some of these. Like they're not all going to pan out in Power 4 football just because they were good within the G5. And then in the backside of things, you bring in CJ Bakersville, who played a decent season at cornerback for San Diego State last year. So you have some young G5 transfers on the defensive side of the ball that you're looking to make a massive impact to take a step forward this year. It was a team that was picked towards the top of the conference, kind of a sleeper range last year. They're in the same spot this year. They only rattled off 7 last year and went 4-6 in the conference. The best part about your defense is you return Ben Roberts, who was a freshman All-American. He put up 100 tackles last year. He's going to be the star of the defense. In the grand scheme of things, you got to look at their schedule, which I don't love. You draw Washington State on the road. You draw Arizona. You go play in, what am I trying to say? Stillwater. Thank you, JP, for your hat. Shout out No Rivals. And at Iowa State, which is not an easy place to win. I'll give you the credit where it's deserved, Jake. Late in the year, that's a tough place to play, man. That place can get rowdy. So I don't like the road schedule. I think that's where this team falls down. But I do want to say I'm high on them again. I really think this team can be it with that combo in the backfield. Jake, I'll go to you just because I want you to pick apart my Big 12 takes. But what do you think on Texas Tech? Do you think they could kind of sneak their way up middle of the year?
Yeah, this seems like a team that's always kind of a dark horse pick, especially with Jerry Maguire and the way he kind of recruits, I suppose. Micah Hudson, you highlighted in Parks, that wide receiver. He's the highest recruit, I believe, in Texas Tech history as a 5-star. So I'm really interested to watch him and see if he could be the number 1 guy his freshman year. That would be really interesting. Otherwise, I think you highlighted it on the defense. Got a lot of questions, and that was a group that struggled last year. Baron Morton wise, I think I heard a stat today, or it was like Texas Tech hasn't had their starting quarterback play a full season since 2017. So can you keep Baron Morton healthy? I think he even got hurt. He even got hurt at one point last year after going in for Shucks. So I mean, man, you got to keep him upright before we talk wins and losses with this group, because you can throw that out the door too if that doesn't happen.
Shout out to their transfer to Team Adidas, by the way. It was a beautiful branding. JP, what do you think on the Red Raiders?
Just give them time. I think the recruiting it's going to get better and better. They continue to land their best classes they've had there in, if not ever, in years. So just give them time. I think this is still building. I think we're still building Lubbock.
I also want to say, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there. I just kind of wanted to, if anybody heard me say, I think I said Jerry Maguire, not the movie.
I was going to say,
you definitely said Jerry Maguire.
Joey Maguire.
We are going to let it go.
Mark, I thought,
show him the money.
Mike
I
would
couldn't
not
even
have
name.
let that go.
Mike would have been
Mike would not have let that go. But talking about Texas Tech quickly, I think not a lot of people think about that, but they have a good chance this year to cement themselves as the Texas staple of the Big 12. Obviously, you have Baylor, you have Houston, but like this
Money's
should
there.
be the bigger brand, and the money, like you can be the Texas brand now in the Big 12, and they need to take that role this year. Reese, what do you think on the Red Raiders before we get to our fast segment?
To quote my buddy Jordan, I just think they're pretty mid. I just don't know what jumps off the page here this year. I think with this team, I think they're just going to be around. They can play spoilers. It's Texas Tech, where they're not going to be complete dirt. I think they're just kind of going to hang around. They can play spoiler, maybe beat some of those top teams, just kind of randomly throughout the year, whether that be at home or on the road.
Okay, there it is. There is majority of the Big 12. We have 4 teams remaining to cover, and we're going to do it just like last week. If it's your first time here, we're going to cover 4 teams in 4 minutes, a minute apiece. Last week, we went 20 seconds over, so hopefully we make it this year. We are going to lead it off with, we're going to go Jake. Everybody has one, correct? Just to
yes, one, just one.
Okay, so we're going to go Jake, JP, Reese, myself, and then we will be done with the fast 4. These teams are not obviously picked at the top of the conference, and we want to talk to you about the grand scheme of the conference after that. So we are going to give you the most information in as little as time possible here. I will start the clock. 2 of these teams are also available on Shop No Rivals. Use the code PTFS when you buy those hats. But let's get it going, JP, if you want to get
Are you driving the switch? Up? Are you driving the transition from
Okay. Yep. Am I going first?
He's driving the bus
first.
Yes, you are going first, Jake, and then we'll go to JP, Reese, and myself. Jake, start us off.
Yeah, let's start with my friends over in Provo. BYU's first year in the Big 12 didn't really go according to plan, I feel like, especially with Kalani Sitake there, head coach. They look to bounce back this year, and they're going to have a challenge because I think they have a predicament right now at quarterback. Jake Retzloff, the community college kid, comes back again for year 2 at BYU. He's going to be battling Gary Bohannon. It seems like a 6th or 7th year guy. He was a guy who was at Baylor even a few years ago. So they're going to be battling for that spot. And I think this is still below average of quarterback play in this league. They just need to find a running back because they lacked a lot in the rushing attack last year. I think that was one of the worst spots on their offense. And it honestly starts with the offensive and defensive line. Will the defensive line have depth this year? Tyler Betty's a stud, but they're going to need to help him out. They're going to have to surround him with some more studs. I think the lack of depth and the fatigue was just the biggest factor in losing 5 straight games last year. I think this is not going to be another turnaround year for them. It's going to take some time. So that's BYU in 2024.
Yeah, going into the next one here, the Houston Cougars. I think Willie Fritz is a home run hire, and I think a ton of people around the country are celebrating that one. The tough part about it, though, is that you're inheriting a program that kind of was in a rough spot under Holgorsen for a long time, right? I think locker room troubles, they weren't recruiting well when they should have been. It all kind of is lined up the wrong way for him in year 1. Defense ranked outside of the top 100 in all major statistical categories a season ago. They'll switch to a 3-4 scheme, only bringing back 2 starters. Now, again, it's not always bad when you only bring back 2 starters if you're outside the top 100 every defensive category. I'm just telling you, a scheme switch with a lot of new guys is going to take more time than you might think. Donovan Smith's a better quarterback than people say. I truly do think he's one of probably the top end in the Big 12 at least. He threw for just about 3,000 a year ago, 22 touchdowns, 13 interceptions. He's going to have to really find a way to carry this football team to new heights. Who's going to be the lead back for Fritz, who loves to run the football? It's going to be Parker Jennings or Jamarian Burnett. It's going to be one of those 2 guys. Fritz is going to implement it. They weren't a good rush team last year. They're going to have to get better here under Fritz. And to be honest with you, it's a team that needs to get better in the state of Texas in recruiting. It's a team that probably sees themselves, after all the G5 success they had, a lot higher in this conference. It's just going to take a little bit of time. Fritz is the right hire, but it doesn't mean it's going to happen right away. Give it 3 or 4 years, and we'll see Houston in a different light.
Yeah, Cincinnati going into this team, they bring back 15 starters, 8 on the offensive side of the ball and 7 on the defensive side of the ball. But how do you feel about that after a disappointing 3-9 season with your new head coach, Scott Satterfield? And this guy's got a winning record from where he came from, 75-49. But Cincinnati might be a little bit of a different problem, I think, jumping to the Big 12 after you were a top dog in your previous conference. Now you're kind of at the middle to the bottom of this conference. Another struggle is you don't really know who your quarterback's going to be this year. Phil still has Brendan Sorsby, who just comes over from Indiana, is listed as the number 1 guy. But Scotterfield says they kind of got a 3-way battle right now for that spot. And then defensively, they struggled. They really, really struggled. But Schaefer recognized this guy's name. They brought in a new defensive coordinator by the name of Tyson Belt, who was Iowa State's linebacker coach from 2016 to 2013. And they're going to bring that new 3-3-5 scheme over with them. So that's going to be a whole new look defense if they can find a way to be productive there and maybe figure out something for that offense. You can see improvements, I think, with the schedule they have. They have their two little back-to-back tough road games. They go Texas Tech and UCF and Iowa State and K-State. But I think you just have reasonable expectations for this team. I think if you can find a way to get to a bowl game, go 5-7 or 6-6, I think this will be a successful year for this team.
All right, looking at Arizona State quickly. They went 3-9 last year, and you really had a lot of injury problems. You played people at quarterback that didn't even play the position. This year, you bring in a really good transfer we'll talk about, but Jaden Rashada goes out. He goes to Georgia. Now he's in court cases and lawsuits, but you bring in dual-threat quarterback Sam Levitt from Michigan State, who's young, but he does have some in-game experience that will benefit you within the Big 12. You have a pretty vocal head coach that wants to go out during the offseason, talk about how hard his job is, how he earned it. Now he's got to put a product on the field that is better than what he has been. They gave it 25 points in 8 out of 12 games last year. On the defensive side of the ball, you're transfer heavy. I think you're led by the Oregon transfer Cole Martin. He should impress in this league. They also brought in transfers from New Mexico State. They brought in G5, Power 4. They really tried to replenish this entire defense. The offense shows you some new looks with that dual threat quarterback. They also bring in USC transfer at running back Raleigh Brown. That should be a good 1-2 punch along with their starter from last year in the backfield. And then they have a young wide receiver room. But if I had to pick one that stood out to you, it'd be Jordan Tyson, who was returning off injury from last year. So it looks like they got some pieces back, and they should be more competitive this year. And Dillingham just needs to take step by step with this program, and they'll finally get there. The schedule's not there. They host Wyoming. They will play at Mississippi State and at Texas State. Those are not easy opponents. Probably Mississippi State's probably your easiest game out of those 3, if that tells you anything. So it's going to be tough to do it this year. But all right, that's Arizona State, and that's 4 teams in 4 minutes. We went a minute over. We ran a little long. That's on us. But if we would have done 5 minutes, we would have done
show
5
people
minutes, 6 seconds. But we knocked those out. So those are the 4 teams that are picked towards the bottom of the conference. Obviously, we still need to mention them. But that's all of the teams. We went through team-by-team previews. Now let's talk grand scheme of the conference. Roundtable style, give me a player to watch. Lead it off, Jake, and we'll go JP, Reese, and myself. But give us your player to watch in the Big 12.
Yeah, I'm going to go RJ Harvey at running back for UCF.
Original. Really thought hard about that one.
Okay, I didn't know where
raise over here.
I thought that was the whole point. I thought we were going
heads up, Shave.
Well, I was gonna get to that because I think that this is a
go
guy,
ahead.
I just think if you could name me 3 running backs in the Big 12, if I pulled a random stranger who knows some college football, I'm not sure if they put Harvey on that list. You got Giddens, you got Brooks, you got Ollie Gordon. I can name 100 more, but RJ Harvey is a guy who could possibly take that number 1 spot as the best running back in the league if the opportunity comes. So I think that's a name we got to know. And I think he's going to be really important in this offense, especially with helping out KJ Jefferson. I think KJ Jefferson's success and his revitalization in his success at Arkansas is really dependent on that running back room, and in particular, the number 1 back in RJ Harvey.
I really like that one. I think RJ Harvey's a fine pick. I would agree. It's a conference loaded with running backs, and I think RJ Harvey kind of slips under the rug every now and then. So I like that pick. JP, who is your player to watch?
Yeah, we're going to go with defensive tackle, West Virginia, Troy transfer, TJ Jackson. Neil Brown continues to find ways to make sure that the interior offensive and defensive line are solid. This guy is a perfect fit for that. 27 tackles and 7 TFLs a season ago. He's going to be a run stopper. He's going to be a threat in the middle of that defense that hopefully West Virginia can work through a tough schedule and find their way to 7-8 wins.
Reese.
Give me the duo out west. Give me Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter. I'm kidding, guys. I'm kidding. Calm down. Jesus. You think people don't know who those guys are by now? One's on the cover of NCAA football. All right, whatever. Anyway, I'm gonna go with whoever talked about that. Parks talked about Baylor before. I'm going with DeQuan Finn, the transfer coming in from Toledo. He had a lot of success over there. You had 2,000 yards and 20 touchdowns in back-to-back years. And it's an interesting year. You talk about the coach being on the hot seat and kind of his focus being on that defense. But JB talked about it before. If this team does have 5 or 6 wins, it's because this guy's going to light the world on fire. And I think he can find a way to have success in this conference.
All right, I like that one. I'm going to go back to the defensive side of the ball and join JP. But I feel like in this conference, we talk about a lot of questionable defenses and a lot of questionable secondaries outside of Kansas. But Jake, I'm going to give you a little love here. Shout out to Jeremiah Cooper. This is a really good safety. Iowa State brings back 27 solo tackles last year and 5 picks. He looks to take a step forward. He's going to be an all-conference guy in the secondary for the Clones. And I think he's a player that you need to learn and you're going to hear about on Saturdays this fall. So that is my player to watch within the Big 12. There are the players. Let's move down into the grand scheme of the conference and let's talk conference championship game pick and prediction. Who do you got in it and who do you got winning it? Jake, tell us who wins the Big 12 this year.
Yeah, I think you could put an asterisk by both of these teams because if both of their quarterbacks get hurt, neither one of them are making this title. But I got Kansas versus Utah. That may come as a surprise to you, Parks.
He's all in, baby. I love that.
I am all in on this football team. I think the defense is going to take another step. They got to get better on the rush defense, and if they can improve that, I think top to bottom, this team is pretty damn good. But like I said before, Jalen Daniels got to stay healthy. They can't rely on a backup quarterback and still make a conference title this year. Same thing for Utah. Either one of those guys get hurt, they're relying on freshmen the rest of the way. So stay healthy, and I'll get my pick right. I'll pick Utah to win it, though. I think that this is it's going to be the toughest place to play for any opponent. Iowa State's got to travel there in November. And defensively, I think this is probably the best defense in the league.
All right, Utah to pick to win the Big 12 from the Big 12 guy himself. JP, is he right, or do you have a different take?
I have a different team in there. I do have Utah. That's solidified for me. That was from the start when they joined this conference. I thought they were the most talented team in the conference. I've had 4 different teams in this second slot, and I'm still not happy with it. So with the lightest pencil you could possibly write with, I'll take Kansas State. I just don't love.
Wow, original.
Yeah, I know. I want experienced quarterback.
Got him,
I want a good defense. So I don't know. I didn't want to put Oklahoma State in. I didn't want to put. I didn't trust the quarterback play enough. I thought about putting West Virginia. I thought the schedule was too tough for him. I had Iowa State in there. I don't know how big the jump is, and I don't think they're catching anyone by surprise, even if the media says that they are. And so, I've had 4 different teams in here. I'll just take the team I think is overall the second best, and it's boring, and I don't agree with it, and it probably won't be my final pick, but I'll do Utah, Kansas State. Utah is your Big 12 title.
I'm just trusting that, Kansas can snap a 14-game losing streak. No pressure or anything. I'm just hoping that they'll finally get it right this year and win the Sunflower Showdown.
I don't love it. I don't love it.
You got 30 seniors at Kansas, so you got to hope that they're really itching to get that one.
Bought in.
Reese, who do you got in the Big 12 championship, and who do you have winning it?
We might all have Utah. I have Utah in there, but I got Oklahoma State. It's kind of chalk. It's hard to see your 1 and 2 go in there, I think. But Oklahoma State bringing back 19 guys. You get that schedule. And you talk about quarterbacks being healthy. Yeah, if Cam Rising stays healthy, they're going to get in there. But I think with Oklahoma State, even if you bring in shaky hands as your backup, you still have the best offensive line in the country, and you have all to hand the ball off to. Yeah, I know he's gone. I know he's gone, but I'm just saying, but if you bring in a guy like that who's just nervous as shit, you can hand the ball off to Oligor, and you have that offensive line. You can find a way to still have a good game plan, I feel like, as well, too. I think Oklahoma State, that defense will be solid, too. Plus, you play K-State and Utah during the year, too. So they're going to play 2 of the harder games in the entire conference. So I think they'll be a little more tested, too. And then give me Oklahoma State to win it.
All right. There's a little bit of a different take, and I'm going to join you. I'm going to take Oklahoma State over Utah, but I think Gundy just finally gets his. I think people are not paying enough attention, and I got to see it firsthand, and I talked about him in our preview last year as a true freshman. But Zane Flores is a really good backup option behind Bowman. I really think this dude can sling it, and he can step up. He's got some game experience now from last year. He's a very good quarterback. He was one of the best quarterbacks in the state of Nebraska, and I was pretty mad I think he's the all-time passing leader in high school football in Nebraska, to be honest with you, and at Gretna High School in Omaha. But dude, that's a really good second option. You have the best offense line in the Big 12. You have the best running back in the country. I think it's enough this year for Gundy, who's one of the better coaches actively out there, to win this conference this year. And I'm going to stay true to the Big 12. I'm not letting a new member come in and win the damn conference. So give me Oklahoma State to win it this year.
That's a good call. The Oklahoma State and Utah, out of all of our predictions, is the only matchup that will be played during the regular season. So something to note as well.
All right, there it is. There's the Big 12.